I would caution veterans.
Yes.
I would caution veterans on allowing politicians to talk you into becoming victims.
I'm with you on that, by the way.
I'm not a damn victim.
Yeah. Really want to just lean into some of your perspectives. America as a whole, when America's divided, and America's definitely divided right now, and what Americans tend to do is to look at Washington, D.C. to solve the problem, look at politicians to solve the problem, which I think you and I both agree that's, even as a someone who's sitting in office, I think we both agree that that's not the solution. I think real change, the change that we're looking for as Americans in our country it starts in our homes, in our communities, is in our churches, in our schools, in our states, and then eventually, that change should spread to Washington, not the other way around. Furthermore, I believe that change starts with men in the communities. Where do you think America has lost that reality, to where we just stop looking at men in our communities and our family and looking to Washington D.C. to solve the problem?
There's quite a few. I think there's quite a few answers to that. I'm actually going to leave the most important one to the end. First of all, I think it's important to understand that the United States is not just a political organization, right? We're not just a government system. This is one of the reasons why I get really pissed when politicians like our democracy. And I don't just get mad because actually we're a constitutional republic that uses democratic processes, right? We can argue semantics. I think there's some important ones there, but we can argue that. What I get upset with that is just the point you made. Mm-hmm. When politicians talk about our democracy all the time, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to think about problems, challenges, opportunities through the lens of our political process. That is not what is unique about the United States. What is unique about the United States is that it was supposed to be established in such a way as to maximize two things: individual liberty and personal responsibility. And those two things have to exist together. If you take away the personal responsibility, well, it's not liberty anymore, it's licentiousness. It means I get to do what I want and somebody else has to pay for it. If you take away the liberty with just personal responsibility, well now, okay, great, I'm personally responsible to do what? Vote? I get to pick my political leaders. Does that mean I'm free? I mean, really? If freedom is nothing more than I get to vote for politicians every couple of years, then I'm not really free. I get minimal say in essentially who's going to rule me, right? So those two things are absolutely critical. Without them, this country, as envisioned and as laid out in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, doesn't exist. It becomes something else. It becomes a place on the map. It becomes a system of government with a people, but it is not rooted in what that vision was going to be. Now, a lot of people look at that and be like, well, that sounds great, Nick, but we clearly haven't lived up to it. What about slavery? What about this? Yeah, those are horrible. Those are horrible. And the reason why they were horrible is not just because they're immoral. The other reason why they're horrible is because they were a direct contradiction to what we said we believed about ourselves and about reality when we were established as a country. This is why people like Frederick Douglass would fight against people like William Lloyd Garrison. William Lloyd Garrison, who was a big abolitionist, said, we got to throw out the Constitution. The Constitution allows for slavery. It's fundamentally flawed. Frederick Douglass was like, no, the Constitution is understood through the lens of the Declaration of Independence as a liberty document. And what he did was he appealed to Americans to live up to our values, not to change them. Live up to the values that you've articulated. That's the first part that's really critical to understand.
Yeah.
Because for the last several decades, and it started with the progressive era in the early 20th century, none of this is new, really started hardcore with the early 20th century. That's where you start to see this division on what is America really about. Is it really about individual liberty and personal responsibility? So a small, limited government, which provides a framework for defense from foreign aggression and defense from domestic turmoil, thievery, robbery, murder, rape, etc. Is it that, or is it this large government entity which is now responsible for taking care of us? And that's where you start to see this major split taking place between the early progressive era and what you might call a more traditionalist approach to the concept of the American dream. And you combine that with what happened during the civil rights movement, because the civil rights movement was a wonderful thing with respect to living up to that original concept of, no, you don't get to deny someone their basic humanity and their basic civil liberties. God-given, by the way. Mm-hmm. That's not some new Christian nationalist concept. God-given rights is enshrined right there in the Declaration of Independence. And it was done so very intentionally because we wanted to set a precedent that you have certain rights as a result of you being a human being. Nothing more is required. They're not grants or privileges given to you by politicians or a government entity. It's something that is, you have it as a part, just by very nature of your existence, you have certain rights afforded to you, and government's role is to protect them. And so the civil rights movement was supposed to be about, yes, we do not deny people rights based off of their skin color. We do not deny people rights based off of their sex, right? Which absolutely, right? That's an absolute moral imperative. But then you also saw this other element around the 60s, some of whom tried to latch onto the civil rights movement, not because I think they were genuinely interested about civil rights, but they were genuinely interested in Marxism. And that's where you get the Frankfurt School out of Germany. That's where you get Herbert Marcuse. That's where you get, writings coming into popularity later in the 70s from Antonio Gramsci, who was a socialist from Italy, that talked about the march through the institutions and how for Marxism to be successful, you can't just rely on it as an economic theory. You actually have to set up competing institutions, or you have to infiltrate institutions. And that's what became known as the Long March through the institutions. And so what happened is that you had a very neo-Marxist, and again, you say this and people are like, oh, the commies coming, Nick. No, just go read what Herbert Marcuse had to say about this. Go read they don't hide the ball. Bernadine Dorn, who was trying to blow up police officers in courthouses, when she got out of jail, didn't stop what she went into academia. And so you started to see this increasingly significant influence within culturally shaping institutions within the United States. And so over several years, what do you have now? Well, now you have this battle going on between, it's not just two worldviews, but fundamentally at some basic level it is one that says, no, this is what our country is supposed to be. And the other side, which has a fundamentally different view of it. And those two views cannot peacefully coexist.
Right.
And that's the part that needs to be understood. This is not something that can be solved merely by electing somebody different. Because if you have a worldview which says that the United States is fundamentally evil at its core, that means fundamental problems with our system of government. That means fundamental problems with the underlying philosophies, all of that. How do I coexist with that? I'm willing to let them live out their life the way they want. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to say, you want to go be a communist? Great. You and a bunch of your friends go buy some property and you can share everything in common. You can run business. You can do whatever you want. You can live out your socialist utopian dream right here in the United States without changing anything politically. But that's not good enough for you.
No, they want to change our structure.
You want to force me to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to do it. Why can't I be free to live the way I want and you're free to live the way you want? Well, they're not willing to accept that. So the reason why I go through this long explanation is because it's important to understand that this is not a simple debate on whether or not we should have one more welfare program or what the top marginal tax rate should be on the income tax. This is about a fundamentally different view for what society should look like. And it is not rooted in John Locke, Adam Smith, Thomas Jefferson, Madison. It's not rooted in that. It is rooted in Marx, Marcuse. You could argue postmodernism to some degree. Antonio Gramsci. That's what it's rooted in. The two will not. One will win. I will put it that way. I would like for one to win peacefully, because the big question is, how did this other one rise to prominence? Like, I'm old enough to remember the Berlin Wall falling and thinking to myself, well, that socialism's dead. Right. We won, they lost. Like, it was obvious.
Yeah. I mean, that's the question. Like, how is socialism even like a consideration in America at this point?
Academia, socialists within academia were thrilled when the Soviet Union fell because they even said this. They recognized it as an opportunity to rebrand socialism outside the specter of the Soviet Union. They could point to the Soviet Union and be like, that wasn't real socialism. That was a perversion. Real socialism is this utopian idea. Real socialism was the beginning days of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela until all of a sudden the country started tanking. Then it was like, well, that's not real socialism either. Right. But if you think about it, socialism actually appeals to people at a very, very basic level, which is this idea that I want to be able to provide. I want to be able to take care of my family. I want to be able to do these things. I find it difficult. Other people are being successful. I'm not. Clearly, there's a problem with the system. So one of the things that it seeks to do initially when it's trying to argue for itself is it takes away your personal responsibility and it puts it onto some sort of enemy that has exploited you or oppressed you, right? Because that's the new dynamic, oppressor and oppressed. oppressed you. And then it promises that if you join this movement and you elect these people, they will get back at your oppressors and they'll liberate you. So that's an appealing idea. That's an appealing notion to somebody looking for answers for why their life isn't working. So if those are the two competing philosophies, and one of those competing philosophies has become incredibly prevalent in academia, Hollywood, arts and entertainment, the media, and then all of your teachers come from higher ed down.
Come from those places.
I don't think it's difficult to understand how an idea which started here got to where it is right now and how it's gained an intense popularity. Because every time your kid watches a show, what is that show going to feature any positive male role models? Or is it going to kill off all the male role models that might have been your old heroes? Like Luke Skywalker is a washed up, idiot now who couldn't do anything as good as the Mary Sue who just showed up to replace him, right? Han Solo is a deadbeat dad, right? I issue these as some of these examples because they may seem like, oh, really? No, that there is a message that is going through that is
Al
being
Bundy.
pushed. Yeah, Al Bundy, So there's no positive male role models. Your history is bad, right? America is not a force for good in the world, right? This is the narrative. You can't even be sure of what gender you are. Right. So what do we have here? We have a massive identity crisis that is going on. Who am I as an individual? Who am I in? What is my role and place within society? What do I belong to as far as my country or community? If you're being told that everything that you thought was true is a lie, but here's the thing that's going to make it all better, that's problematic. And if you don't have strong fathers, if you don't have strong husbands, if you don't have people that are actually standing up to be good role models, and to push back against those things that are going on within the culture, you don't have any right to be surprised when your children buy into that.
Which explains the attack on the nuclear family.
Yes. Well, Marx hated the nuclear family. This needs to be understood. Karl Marx was not shy in saying that the nuclear family is a form of oppression. Like, there's a reason why this terminology keeps being used. This is not me being a conspiracy theorist. They write about it openly.
Sure, yeah.
Right. So
they don't hide it.
Yeah, they don't hide it. They're very proud of it when they're talking amongst themselves or when they're writing their literature or when they're teaching their classes. They understand that their presidential candidate doesn't get to come out and say, I hate the nuclear family because it prevents us from reaching a new level of social utopia, right?
Right.
But there's this underlying suspicion that is constantly put forward that, again, men are the source of evil, especially, white Christian men. I mean, you're like the tippy top of the evil pyramid. The nuclear family is oppressive toward women and whatnot. Having children is hurting the environment and destroying the planet, right? Like this.
Yeah.
Is anything I'm saying something you haven't heard coming from somebody that was pretty proud of those ideas? Well, how do you combat that? Well, I'll tell you, hey, you can't combat it if you don't have strong men that are willing to step up and actually lead their families. You don't have it if you don't have strong women and mothers that are coming alongside and fighting with them and insisting on a set of values that they teach their children. You certainly don't have it if you are handing your children off to a government entity to educate them and then not remaining either diligently involved in that process or choosing an alternative. So I think everything that we're seeing right now is very, very predictable when you look at what has transpired over time to take over certain culturally shaping institutions at the same time that they've denigrated the church, denigrated the nuclear family, and denigrated the father.
One of the things that I've talked a lot about lately is American exceptionalism. I've always believed America to be exceptional.
Yeah.
What do you think is it about America that makes America exceptional?
What has made American exceptional is that two twin concept: individual liberty and personal responsibility.
Because no one else has that.
If you look at, we hear the Declaration of Independence. We hear that portion about, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We hear that, and it's rote memorization. Of course, everyone believes that. Nobody believed that in 1776.
Right.
No other country in the world. I mean, the closest you got was the UK, right? Nobody else believed it. We hold these truths to be that all men are created equal.
Yeah.
Like, no, they didn't think that. Nobody thought that. That was earth shattering at the time. And then it was this idea that, wait a second, you mean I get to go to a country and there's a great deal of risk there. It's a new country, right? There's a wide open frontier, but it can be hostile and dangerous, right? And if I build something The government doesn't dictate what I build or how I build it or where I build it. The government doesn't come in and regularly confiscate my property. The government doesn't come in and regularly terrorize me or force conscript me into the military to go fight foreign wars for a king. Like you're telling me this is a possibility? Yes.
That's exceptional.
That's exceptional. Yeah. There's no, now other countries have started to adopt those same practices, but for generations now. But the important thing to understand is that still within the United States, that individual liberty with personal responsibility, that wasn't just political freedom. We put so much emphasis on the political freedom. That was also economic freedom.
Yeah.
And it was, if we're being honest, it was the economic freedom that people were actually seeking the most.
For sure. I mean, look, right now I can own my property, but if I don't pay my taxes on it, they're going to take it from me.
Yeah.
So you don't truly own.
It is still, by comparison within the world, much easier to, own property, start a business, do these things in the United States, but it is becoming progressively more difficult.
Right.
And the way it becomes progressively more difficult is through more taxation, more regulation, more rules, more restrictions, more executive branch edicts.
More government.
More government, yeah. Right? There it is. So that is what has made us exceptional, but we are increasingly becoming a very, very sad and diminished version of ourselves, because as uncertainty and chaos works in, people start prioritizing security over liberty. And the problem is that the more that they seek that sort of security, because it sounds nice, right? Why can't the government just do more to take care of us? Here's a good one. Why can't the government just do more to take care of veterans? I would caution veterans.
Yes.
I would caution veterans on allowing politicians to talk you into becoming victims.
I'm with you on that, by the way.
I'm not a damn victim.
Yeah.
Right? I knew what I was doing. I was proud to do it. That doesn't mean I've always been proud of my country's foreign policy, but I was proud of my service, the people I served alongside, and you are not going to purchase that from me by offering me a check as long as I just say I did this, had this, or look, to the veterans out there that served, that are struggling with whether it be injuries, PD, you are entitled to the medical care you were promised when you signed that contract to serve your country. But there's a big, big difference from getting what you are entitled to and being talked into accepting a version of yourself that doesn't exist or that is a diminished version of you in exchange for a paycheck. And that concerns me.
Yeah, it's been one of my messages. If you get 100% disability and that's what you're disabled and you need it, then get it. But if you're not entitled to sit back on your couch and throw your feet up for the rest of your life and be a victim.
No.
Like that, your communities need you. Like,
yes.
Take off the uniform and do something important again.
Yeah, look, I think it is a travesty that when we look at previous wars, we didn't properly understand things like PTSD. Mm-hmm. But can I just say something? The key word in PTSD is traumatic. I see people talking about getting money for PTSD who never deployed.
Right.
What was the traumatic thing that you suffered from? And the answer is they didn't.
Right.
But there's this idea that, well, you served during wartime, so you should be able to avail yourself of this. And I've seen people say, well, yeah, no, the goal is to get as much as you can. I'm like, is that really the goal? Is the goal to game the system? I mean, definitely take the benefits you are entitled to by virtue of your service. Do not game the system.
To give in to social benefits.
Yes.
So, yeah. You're participating in the problem.
Yeah. And it's important to understand there's a lot of people within power that want you to do that. There's a big difference from being entitled and feeling entitled. And politicians, please hear me when I say this. There's a lot of politicians that have recognized that there is a great deal of power for them if you feel entitled to something you're not. And you will lose something of yourself if you buy into that.
Yeah.
Because it moves you into this realm now where I deserve things I haven't earned. And the only way you're going to be able to get it is by taking things from other people who earned it. And you will lose something of yourself if you buy into that, because there are so many politicians that are willing to sell it to you.
Coming from somebody serving political office.
I see it all the time.
Yeah. Yep.